My name is Elara Sterling, and at 14, I was the unwanted truth hidden inside a multi-million-dollar lie. My life in a sterile Connecticut estate was a constant countdown to disaster. This story isn't about the years of being scorned, but the single brutal night I learned the shocking deadly price of that abandonment. The disaster struck during the city's annual charity gala, a night my parents and my sister Chloe were out celebrating. I was utterly alone when the agonizing rupture hit. The pain was searing, immediate, and utterly consuming, far beyond anything I had ever known. I staggered desperately to the nearest sink, and instead of a cough, I violently vomited a massive torrent of bright red blood. I knew I was dying, and my last conscious thought was that calling my mother would only earn me scorn for ruining her perfect evening. I bypassed their number, shakily dialed 911, and collapsed onto the cold marble floor as the world dissolved. The paramedics found me on the brink. I woke up on a gurney at the hospital where a frantic doctor told me I needed emergency surgery in 15 minutes. The hospital staff reached my parents at their exclusive party, interrupting their celebration. The doctor explained the critical necessity for survival. Their reaction, cutting through the distant music and laughter, was immediate and chilling. "We are having fun. Let it die, it doesn't deserve to live." But then, as the medical team prepared for the worst, someone unexpected appeared. When I finally woke up after the surgery, my world had changed. Before we get into the most dramatic details, tell me, what time are you watching and from what city, so I know how far my story has reached? Subscribe to the channel and like this video so my story can reach everyone. I need your help to know how far this story has traveled. When I first regained consciousness, I was moving, jostled by the speed of the ambulance, the searing pain in my gut, the only thing anchoring me to reality, amidst the blinding white lights of the St. Jude's emergency room. The clock was ticking violently against me, the frantic energy of the medical team swirling around my gurney. A doctor, a woman with serious eyes and surgical gloves, delivered the brutal diagnosis: acute gastrointestinal hemorrhage, critically severe, requiring emergency exploratory surgery within the next 15 minutes, or I would certainly bleed out. The frantic efforts to reach my parents began immediately. My mother, Vivian, a ruthless marketing executive, saw me as nothing more than a permanent stain on her flawless public image. This constant contempt fueled a neglect that became lethal. This was the mindset the hospital staff would soon encounter. A nurse, her voice tight with professional urgency, placed the call to Vivian Hayes and Thomas Hayes, interrupting their high society bubble at the most exclusive gala of the season. I could hear the tinny, distant sound of laughter and clinking glasses over the phone's speaker, a sickening counterpoint to the rush of IV fluids entering my arm. The doctor took the phone, explaining the grim prognosis with clinical precision, emphasizing the life-or-death nature of the consent needed for a minor. Vivian's response, sharp and laced with alcohol, cut through the noise. "We are in the middle of a very important networking event, a necessary surgery. This is Elara we're talking about, right? She always overreacts to everything, just give her some Tylenol." The doctor, visibly stunned, insisted this was not an overreaction, that I was facing imminent death. Thomas, my stepfather, took the phone, his voice slick with contempt. "Look, Doc, we're having fun. We are not leaving. We are not authorizing this. Honestly, let it die. It doesn't deserve to live. It's just saving us the trouble later." The line went dead. The doctor looked at the nurse, her expression hardening instantly, and without a word, she initiated the emergency override protocol, a rare and risky maneuver, but necessary to save my life. Simultaneously, she barked an order to the charge nurse: "Call Child Protective Services now. Report of gross medical neglect on a minor, documented refusal of life-saving treatment, and recorded statement of abandonment." The nurse rushed to the administrative desk, the cold words of Thomas Hayes hanging in the air, captured by the automated recording system for the hospital's legal department, a piece of evidence that would soon change everything. The medical team prepared to wheel me into the operating theater. The final moments before the anesthetic hit were filled with the realization that my own parents had actively chosen to let me perish, viewing my death as an administrative convenience, while the nurse frantically searched through my outdated contact list for any secondary emergency number. The emergency team moved with terrifying speed, but despite the critical window of time, I knew the legal and ethical barriers surrounding a minor without parental consent were formidable. In that chaotic lull, an old dusty name from a school form dating back years finally appeared on the nurse's screen: Jeremiah Sterling. Jeremiah, or Jerry as I knew him, was Vivian's younger brother, a highly successful owner of a custom auto repair shop, a man Vivian had systematically alienated because he refused to join their shallow elite social circle. He preferred the honest scent of motor oil to the cloying perfume of my mother's galas. He had the financial stability and the genuine character that my parents utterly lacked, running a business that pulled in more than enough. But he was always deemed common. The hospital administrator finally reached Jerry at his shop, the sound of power tools briefly cutting through the phone line. The administrator's voice was blunt. "Your niece, Elara Sterling, is bleeding to death. Her legal guardians have refused surgery and stated she should be left to die. We need immediate authorization." The administrator heard a deafening silence on the line, followed by the clatter of a wrench being dropped. Jerry didn't waste a single second demanding explanations or questioning his sister's monstrous decision. He simply asked, his voice low and dangerous, "What do I sign to save her life?" He tore out of his shop and drove like a maniac to St. Jude's, arriving just as the operating room doors were about to swing shut. He was a man out of place in the sterile high-end hospital lobby, wearing work boots and grease-stained jeans among the hushed luxury. Within moments, he was cornered by the hospital's legal counsel and a representative from CPS, already alerted by the charge nurse. Jerry didn't hesitate when presented with the paperwork for emergency temporary guardianship. He scanned the documents, understood the gravity of the legal commitment, and with a firm hand that had worked metal his whole life, he signed his name, officially accepting the role of my temporary legal protector, usurping the rights of Vivian and Thomas Hayes in a moment of crisis. The signed papers were rushed to the surgical team literally seconds before the medical window of opportunity would have closed forever. Jerry didn't get to see me. He only saw the doors of the OR swing shut, knowing my life was now hanging in the balance because of his swift, decisive action. He spent the agonizing next 5 hours pacing the cold, deserted waiting room, a solitary figure of genuine concern in a space built for performative displays of wealth, until a surgeon finally emerged to confirm the operation was a success. The slow, drifting ascent back to consciousness was disorienting, marked by the steady beeping of monitors and the dry air of the recovery room, but the pain had dulled to a bearable throb. The first thing I focused on was the small white magnetic board above my bed, detailing my care team, and written clearly beneath the heading "Legal Guardian" was the name Jeremiah Sterling. It hit me with a shocking finality. My parents were gone, legally stripped of their power over me by their own malice. A few hours later, Jerry walked in, his presence radiating an unfamiliar, grounding warmth, not the brittle, demanding energy I was used to from Vivian. He didn't offer platitudes or demand gratitude. He simply pulled up a chair and said, "It's good to see you awake, Elara. You gave us all a serious scare." His concern was real, unconditioned by image or expectation. Later that afternoon, a woman in a modest suit introduced herself as Dana Lewis, the assigned agent from Child Protective Services. Dana was professional but kind, explaining the legal process and that my statement was crucial for the upcoming permanent guardianship hearing. I was nervous, but the overwhelming sense of security from Jerry's presence gave me the courage to speak the truth. I didn't just tell her about the night I nearly died. I told her everything that preceded it, the years of systematic neglect. I recounted being refused necessary dental work because Vivian deemed it too expensive for a minor issue. I described the chronic lack of necessary dietary supplements requested by the school nurse for my mild anemia, consistently ignored because Vivian was too busy tracking her stock portfolio. The emotional abuse, the constant ridicule, the casual cruelty of being told I was a failure, it all spilled out raw and honest. Dana Lewis listened intently, nodding and taking careful notes, and then confirmed the gravity of the situation, the parents' explicit refusal of life-saving medical care captured on tape, combined with the detailed history of neglect, elevated the case far beyond simple incompetence. It was a clear case of intentional abandonment and child endangerment. The attending physician, Dr. Chen, also provided a chilling report confirming that the delay caused by my parents' refusal had pushed me to the brink of irreversible organ damage, directly linking their actions to the threat of my death. The hospital's legal department had already formally transferred all evidence, including the damning audio recording of Thomas's vile command, to the CPS attorney's office, solidifying the grounds for the immediate pursuit of a final permanent termination of parental rights. The hospital became a safe sanctuary, but outside those sterile walls, the fallout from the CPS investigation was spreading like a virulent infection through the polished facade of the Hayes family's life. The investigation swiftly transcended the medical neglect, delving into the family's broader circumstances. This wasn't merely a private family matter anymore. The hospital's report, and the involvement of Child Protective Services, generated significant legal documentation, which quickly found its way into the hands of the corporate compliance department at Vivian's prestigious marketing firm. The scandal surrounding the documented, serious lapse in judgment and ethics, stemming from her actions, directly impacted her role as a high-level director. Within 2 weeks, Vivian Hayes was placed on paid administrative leave, her access to client accounts and internal systems revoked pending a formal internal investigation into her moral conduct and overall fitness for leadership. Thomas the investor found himself facing silent but swift exclusion. High-stakes partners sensitive to public perception and legal liability began quietly questioning his moral compass and reliability, jeopardizing several key deals he was managing. The worst initial blow, however, fell upon Chloe, the supposed golden child, who had always lived above reproach. News travels fast within the exclusive circles of the prestigious private academy she attended. The Board of Governors, highly sensitive to image and under immense pressure from other wealthy parents, disgusted by the Hayes' actions, formally issued a letter demanding Chloe be immediately suspended for an indefinite period. Her behavior at the gala's aftermath, deemed controversial and damaging to the school's reputation, due to the intense media scrutiny, albeit anonymous at first surrounding the case, made her an immediate liability. The lavish lifestyle that had defined the Hayes family began to crack under the financial and reputational stress. Their expensive legal team was demanding retainers totaling over $100,000, funds they hadn't anticipated needing. Simultaneously, the bank began sending worrisome notifications regarding irregularities in their commercial debt, servicing a detail that the CPS financial investigators, now actively scrutinizing their assets, were also quickly discovering, revealing a desperate attempt to maintain a rich image despite mounting liabilities. The investigation was peeling back layers of deception, exposing that the Hayes' opulent lifestyle was built on a crumbling foundation of debt and superficiality. The day I was discharged from the hospital, instead of being driven back to the cold opulence of the mansion, I found myself in a different kind of home, a small, surprisingly cozy apartment situated above Uncle Jerry's sprawling custom auto repair shop. The transition was jarring yet profoundly comforting. The Hayes house was expansive, silent, and felt like a museum constantly demanding perfection. Jerry's apartment, though modest, was filled with the sounds of tools clanking from the workshop below, the smell of freshly brewed coffee, and an unfamiliar, genuine warmth. The contrast was immediate and stark. Jerry never pushed me to talk or to get better quickly. He simply offered stability and patience. My physical recovery was slow, complicated by the severity of the internal damage, but my mental recovery accelerated rapidly under his care. He gave me space, but was always present. One afternoon, noticing my restless boredom, Jerry gently coaxed me down to the shop floor. He didn't intend for me to work. He began showing me the fundamentals of mechanical work not as a career path, but as a lesson in logic and self-sufficiency. He taught me how to diagnose a problem, how to strip a part down to its core, and how to patiently reassemble it into a functioning whole. It was about finding the value in tangible creation, a stark contrast to the abstract, image-driven world of my mother. He explained that success wasn't about being on the cover of a magazine, but about doing honest work you love. The true measure of a man's wealth is his integrity, he often said, and for the first time in my life I felt truly respected and seen not for my grades or my compliance, but for the inherent person I was. Jerry's love was unconditional. A stable anchor I had never known existed entirely different from the conditional achievement-based affection Vivian showered on Chloe. The atmosphere of non-judgmental acceptance allowed me to finally breathe. I realized that security wasn't measured in square footage but in emotional reliability, and in this small apartment above a garage, I felt safer and richer than I ever had in the Hayes' mansion. I began to heal piece by piece, just like the engines Jerry taught me to rebuild. 3 months after the medical emergency, the temporary state of limbo ended and we prepared for the final custody battle, the permanent termination of Vivian and Thomas Hayes' parental rights. This was the moment of truth. My former parents arrived with a formidable legal team, their expensive suits and composed, arrogant demeanor starkly contrasting with Jerry, who stood with the CPS attorney resolute and calm. Their defense strategy was aggressive, paint Jerry as an opportunist, seeking financial gain, and portray the hospital's recording as a misinterpreted statement made under extreme duress. They tried to minimize the neglect as minor parental oversights. However, the evidence marshaled by the CPS and Jerry's lawyer was overwhelming and brutally objective. They presented the chilling audio recording of Thomas's voice explicitly stating, "Let it die, it doesn't deserve to live." This single piece of evidence played in the silent courtroom demolished their claim of duress. The y-axis of the hospital monitors showing my near-fatal blood pressure crash was presented along with the detailed medical testimony from Dr. Chen, who confirmed that the delay directly constituted child endangerment. Following the medical evidence, the CPS agent Dana Lewis systematically presented the accumulated records of long-term neglect. The ignored school nurse requests the pattern of verbal abuse documented during my counseling sessions, and the financial discrepancies unearthed during their investigation, proving the Hayeses valued their image over my well-being. Finally, it was my turn to take the stand. I spoke calmly, recounting my life not with anger, but with the flat, emotionless tone of someone stating indisputable facts. The years of being scorned, the preferential treatment given to Chloe, and the absolute solitude of the night I bled out. My testimony was powerful precisely because of its restraint. It was the testimony of a child who had accepted her worthlessness until a stranger stepped in. The high point of the entire event came when the judge, visibly moved by the evidence and my composure, delivered the verdict. He didn't mince words, citing the shocking disregard for a minor's life and persistent documented pattern of emotional and medical neglect. He declared the parental rights of Vivian Hayes and Thomas Hayes permanently and irrevocably terminated, granting full legal and permanent guardianship to Jeremiah Sterling until I reached the age of 18. Vivian let out a strangled theatrical gasp, collapsing slightly into Thomas's arms, but her eyes weren't filled with grief for me, but with utter despair for her shattered public image and loss of control. I walked out of that courtroom not angry, but profoundly free. Since the day the verdict was read, my life has been defined by conscious choice, the power to choose my own path and my own happiness. The consequences for Vivian and Thomas Hayes were immediate and absolute. The internal investigation at Vivian's firm concluded with her immediate termination for actions inconsistent with the company's ethical code. Her golden reputation irrevocably tarnished by the documented child neglect case. With their primary income source cut off and the financial pressure mounting from the bank and their spiraling legal fees, the facade of their wealth finally crumbled. They were forced to sell the mansion at a significant loss and vanished from the social scene, their opulent, debt-fueled lifestyle reduced to a cautionary tale. Chloe, affected but not ruined, enrolled in a state college still financially supported by them, but stripped of her entitlement. My life, however, was just beginning. Instead of yielding to the societal pressure to chase an Ivy League degree that Vivian always demanded for image, I chose to pursue my newfound passion, mechanical engineering. I saw the value in building, fixing, and creating inspired by Jerry's workshop. I enrolled in a vocational technical college specializing in advanced robotics and precision machinery. It was there I met Ethan Vance, a fellow student in the engineering program. Ethan was the physical embodiment of the unconditional love I had learned about from Jerry. He didn't see the fragile, neglected child. He saw the intelligent, resilient young woman who survived a trauma, and he loved me fiercely for who I was, encouraging my dreams without a single expectation of return. He was the final piece of my healing, helping me trust in my own value beyond any performance metric. I completely cut off all contact with Vivian and Chloe. They attempted weak, sporadic overtures, a birthday card, and email, but I never responded. I felt no hate or desire for revenge, only a firm commitment to protecting the peace and stability Jerry and Ethan had helped me build. My story is about the brutal reality that some parents are monsters, and sometimes the people who share your DNA are the ones who try to kill you. But it's also about a deeper, more profound truth. Family is not defined by DNA, but by the choice to show up, the fidelity to protect, and the unconditional love that helps you heal. Jerry, the modest mechanic, wasn't just my guardian. He was my father, my mentor, and the silent hero who taught me that true wealth is the security of knowing you are loved and valued entirely for yourself. I found my success not in a boardroom like Vivian, but in a clean garage bay surrounded by people who loved me for my hands and my heart, not my price tag. And that, I realized, was a triumph more valuable than all the money in the world.